Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Meerkat Muse. I am your host, Ben, and I come at you through a somewhat bunged up nose, as you can probably tell, thanks to hay fever, which at this time of year starts to become the bane of my existence. It really does. I have suffered from hay fever pretty much all my life, but I'm convinced as I get older that it's actually getting worse with each passing year. And each passing year, I ponder the possibility that there's an injection you can get to help with this, among other things. And I keep pondering it and I keep forgetting about it. I guess I just have this kind of, I don't know really, this ability to block out the experience of the season, so to speak, every year. And every year I tend to forget just how obnoxious hay fever can be. It might actually not be hay fever. I'm assuming it's hay fever, but it might actually just be that I'm experiencing the aftermath of the cold that I had at the end of May. So it's possible that I'm just a bit groggy and bunged up because of that. And in fact, the more I think about it, the more I think that's probably the case. I've taken hay fever medication and all that's done is made me feel tired, and it hasn't really alleviated any of the symptoms. So perhaps it's not hay fever, perhaps it is merely a cold. But either way, I'm bunged up, and either way, hay fever season is going to floor me, as it so often does. And just to kind of flip again with that, sometimes I think it's hay fever because one of the things I've experienced a bit lately are, sore red eyes. That tends to be a classic sign of hay fever. And it's not something I tend to have an issue with a cold as a rule. So who knows, maybe it's a combination of the two, which would be just my luck really, wouldn't it? The frustrating thing is I don't actually know, even after all these years, exactly what sets me off. Different people are set off by different things, pollen-wise. For some people it's tree pollen, others it's grass, others it's a specific type of flower or plant. And in my case, I've never actually found out exactly what sets me off. So basically I just endure hay fever every single year without knowing why. And I don't do enough to stop it, which is my own fault, really, isn't it? I mean, if you don't take the steps to deal with these things, then, well, all I can say really with that is I am an idiot. But most people who know me are probably going to agree with that statement anyway. So what has been going on over the course of the last couple of weeks? Well, if you follow my website, you'll be aware that in the previous sort of Muse, we had just had a rather frantic, busy spell going in and out of London, and lots of stuff going on for my daughter's birthday. The first couple of weeks of June have been arguably somewhat quieter. I've had a couple of unusual dreams, as I always do. I had a dream that I was in a coma. I had a dream that I woke up from this coma after a couple of years with the immediate thought, for every reason, that I had to check my emails. Now, I'd like to believe if I were ever unfortunate enough to be in a coma and I came to, I would have other more important priorities than checking my emails. But that's dreams for you. Dreams produce weird moments. They don't often make sense. I had a dream recently where I was helping Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory to organise a party and having to deal with his various eccentric ways. No idea what brought that on, but that's, again, dreams for you. Throughout all of this, we've been grappling with some unkind weather conditions here in the UK. We've had one or two spells where it's been really bright and sunny and quite warm, and then we've had other spells where it's been overcast and dreary and quite damp. And sometimes we've had all of this in the space of one day, which, needless to say, makes it challenging when deciding what to do about coats and that kind of thing. I hate taking out a coat if I don't need to. But but sometimes I need to, because if it rains, of course, and just in a t-shirt, you're going to be in for an unpleasant time. But if it doesn't rain, you're lugging a coat around, and it's just irritating. But who knows? I mean, with UK weather being what it is, who knows? What else has been going on over the last couple of weeks? Well, the other night, there was this annoying experience regarding someone's car alarm, and it kept going off over and over again all night. I have no idea as to who it belonged to in our little block, but it just kept going off. And it seems like no matter how many times they reset the alarm, it kept going off. And of course, this doesn't just affect the house whose car it is, it affects everyone in the area. And we just could not sleep, because as soon as you think it's done, suddenly it's blaring again. And, well, I think all I can say is, whoever owned the car, if they weren't dealing with the alarm correctly, then they weren't really being very respectful of their neighbours. For all I know, someone had actually parked the car around the corner away from their home because they knew the alarm was a problem, and they decided to dump that problem upon someone else. That's a bit cynical, but you know what? Entirely possible. We've also had some recent internet problems as well. It went down a couple of Sundays ago, and that's frustrating, of course, these days, because so much of what we do relies upon the internet. There are even some video games which don't necessarily, have online play, that still require you to be connected to the internet to work, which is a bit of a joke if you ask me, but that's how some game producers have designed their games these days. And these days, for better or worse, we are very much reliant upon the internet for various things. So when it goes down, we suddenly feel very limited. Our world shrinks, and that can be quite irritating. Perhaps that's a sign of how we could all do with disconnecting a bit more, myself included in that, of course. But nonetheless, that's the reality, isn't it, of the world we live in these days. You lose the internet, you kind of lose your mind slightly, as bad as that is. But I did find other things to do and to kind of help take my mind off that issue, and to try and also take my mind off feeling a bit under the weather as well. And you'll see pictures of this on my website. I recently made a banoffee pie. And for those of you who don't know, banoffee pie is, if you ask me, it's pure heaven. Every element of this is something that speaks to me on a fundamental level as a dessert. You take a biscuit base. Now, I tend to use digestive biscuits for this, as I think most people do. You can have a lot of fun with this particular part. You basically, however you do it, it's fun. I put the biscuits into a plastic Ziploc bag. I take a rolling pin and I smash them until they are powder, which is, as I say, very, very satisfying. A lot of fun to do that. You melt some butter as well, and then you basically mix that all together, and then you take this this crumbly, buttery biscuit base. You put it into a tin. You pat it down. You kind of condense it down. And onto that, you put caramel, and then you put into that caramel bananas. And then on top of that, you put whipped cream as well. And then you bung it in the fridge for a couple of hours, maybe a bit longer. And when it's done, when it's had time to kind of set, so to speak, out comes a wonderful dessert. And as I say, to me, every part of this just sings. It's beautiful to me. I absolutely love banoffee pies. And I actually find, I'm not, excuse me, I'm not a great cook by any means, but I find banoffee pies to be relatively straightforward to make and absolutely delicious and gorgeous. I'm the only one in my house who actually, I think, really, truly appreciates them. My daughter likes the biscuit base. My wife likes the caramel part, but she doesn't like bananas. So I ended up making 2 coffee pies. I ended up eating most all of them, all of it by myself, which somewhat greedy of me, and it certainly hasn't helped the waistline, but it was very, very satisfying. And it kind of, I think, helped, or has begun to help, the enjoyment of making it and that kind of thing, among other things, has helped to shift a little bit of lethargy that I have been feeling of late. This cold, this cold/hay fever, it's kind of hovered unpleasantly in my head, and it has kind of left me feeling a bit exhausted and a little bit down, I dare say, as well. And I think what would help with that feeling, and this is unfortunately something which I can't control, of course, would be if we had better weather, if we had some bright sunshine, some warmth and that kind of thing upon the skin. It would just make me feel a lot better and a lot happier. I genuinely think people's moods are a lot better and happier when we have blue skies and nice warm temperatures, and we don't have this dreary, horrible cloud and wind and rain hanging over us. And, we're in June now, so it's really well past time for the bad weather to just kind of move along. And I think we are owed a good, decent, hot summer this year. And I think if we get a good, decent, hot summer, then I think everyone, generally speaking, will feel a lot better for having this. There's evidence that sunshine is good for you. It promotes, vitamin D, and it just, generally speaking, I think gives people a lift in more ways than one. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get some of that this year. So yeah, we'll have to see. I don't feel quite so tired now, but yeah, there was a spell within the last couple of weeks where I just felt really down, and I was really struggling to feel motivated about anything, to be honest with you. And some of that sometimes is work related. One thing which happened recently was a case of a rather snarky chap who, well, he wanted a bath panel, which, hey-ho, that's one of those things that people sometimes need. We can provide it. But he wanted a shaped bath panel. Now, you can get what's referred to as a P-shaped bath panel. And it's basically a curved panel. You've got one little curved part and then a straight part. And they're called P-shaped bath panels in the industry. They are not a universal product. They are specific to the make and model of the bath they are designed for. So you can't go to a different supplier and expect to get the same panel. Basically, where the curve starts and how far it protrudes and all of that kind of stuff, it's different for every P-shaped bath. Therefore, the panels are different. So you cannot just interchange them as you want. So the risk factor with that was, we could supply a panel, and if it was one of our panels, then as long as it was unopened, the customer could bring it back. But the customer was looking specifically at a third-party panel from one of our third-party suppliers. Special order products cannot be returned under any circumstances, although I didn't get that far into my explanation because he was talking about the end panel for the bath, and in the page of the catalogue my colleague had copied for him, it stated it was a universal panel. Now, basically what that means is, the idea is that the panel gets cut down to size, but it gets cut down on site by the fitter. So, it's not something that suppliers do. They haven't got the time before they send out a panel to cut it down to the customer's requirements. It's something which is always done on site. And that's true for most bath panels. Some bath panels are made to fit a particular size of bath because of the material, but some materials are cut down on site. To explain that in more detail, we sell bath panels which are, all of our panels, or most of our panels, I should say, apart from one or two exceptions, are 1.8 metres in length. All of our front panels are 1.8 metres. All of our end panels are 800 millimetres. Now, most baths are 1.7 metres by 700 mil. So you sell an 1800 panel and if needs be, an 800 end panel, and they're cut down on site. That's normal. But this guy, he got very shirty and very snarky about the idea that he would have to cut the panel himself. Now, that's just how it goes. That's been the case in the industry for many, many years. He got very grumpy about this idea and actually hung up on me because he was that, I guess, put out by it. But he was just, he was shirty from the start, to be honest. And I don't know why people do that. I don't know what they think they're going to achieve. I know some people bend over backwards for rude customers. I, for one, if you're rude to me and you've got an inquiry about something, all I'm going to do is put your query to the bottom of the pile and treat it as a very low priority thing. No matter what your issue is, if you come at me with aggression and posturing and that kind of thing, you'll get short shrift. Customers who are pleasant, I'll go the extra mile for. It's that kind of, the expression is probably a bit unusual here, but there's a classic expression, isn't there? You catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. In other words, the nicer you are, the more likely you are to get somewhere with someone else. I've seen this before. I've seen this before in retail. I've seen this before in this very job, where people can be very bullish and aggressive and nasty in a bid to get their way, and all that happens is that we will put their query and their needs last. And I really wish more people would do that rather than bending over for them, because the people who do this regularly, the people who regularly get aggressive and shouty and snarly, if they get their way from doing that, then they're going to keep doing it, and that's what I think some of them do. They do it once or twice. They find that the sales consultant or the customer service agent or whoever bends over backwards for them, and from that point forward, they know they can carry on being cruel and aggressive and basically bully their way to what they want, and that's not right. So I, for one, will not tolerate that, and my manager, thankfully, they won't tolerate that kind of thing either. It just gets short shrift, as it should, as it absolutely should. So I don't have much patience for that kind of attitude. I've learned in my time in retail that it costs nothing to be nice. Okay, it costs nothing to be polite and courteous, and that's something that I've taken to heart. And one of the things I took to heart as well is this idea that if you find yourself shouting, if you find yourself having to shout, be it dealing with customers, be it dealing with colleagues, you've already lost control of that situation. I learned that lesson from an old boss at an office supplies retail job, and that became somewhat more pertinent in recent times, because I recently found out that one of my colleagues from that job passed away, which is very sad, because the guy in question was absolutely brilliant. He was so happy and chilled and laid back, and he just made you feel relaxed and at ease, and you wanted to work for him, you wanted to work hard for him, and he was just fundamentally a laugh and a real joy to be around, to be fair. He left that job many years ago. I think he left that job in 2008 maybe, so I hadn't seen him for a very long time. But I recently found out that unfortunately he passed away, and it's such a shame, because he wasn't much older than I am now, and so I think, just without going into too much detail, he had some demons that cropped up, and unfortunately not everyone is able to deal with that, and unfortunately they got the better of him in the end. But I will just remember him for being an absolute laugh, a brilliant guy, very, very funny, and just a wonder to work for. He really was. moving away from that particular subject, I move on to the subject of something which is, for anyone who writes, very, very irritating, which is writer's block. I have been trying to do a little bit of work on the next part of my sci-fi trilogy, and I've also been trying to make a little bit of progress with the sequel to Fontana and Istalor, among other things as well. But I've really been struggling to get any momentum going with that. My brain is not cooperating with me at the moment, and this extends to one or two moments of forgetfulness which have troubled me a little bit, actually, and I'm probably being over the top with it. The other day I almost left my phone at work, and the other day I was absolutely convinced I put my phone on the desk, and I even had a memory of doing that, but it was in my jacket pocket when I went to find it. So my poor brain is addled and tired, and clearly it's somewhat ropey at the moment. But perhaps all of that will go away when this kind of like grotty, bunged up feeling well and truly departs, and when I start to feel myself again in more detail. But I just, even as far as like say doing my writing prompts for Meerkat Musings, even those I kind of go to start something and then I freeze, and I find myself just not certain as to what I want to say, and I don't. There's this disconnect between my grey matter and my fingers, which is very, very annoying, of course. As someone who would like to consider themselves to be a writer, when you find yourself not able to write anything, it's extraordinarily aggravating. So, with a bit of luck, as I say, that will pass, and I'll regain some equilibrium in the not so distant future, as this cold finally shifts, and as perhaps hay fever season hopefully ends rather abruptly. I wonder if it's made me a touch grumpy, some of this as well. I mean, I hate feeling under the weather. Who enjoys it, of course. But I've recently found myself, I guess, to a certain degree, butting heads slightly with someone. Again, without being able to go into loads and loads of detail, the general gist of it is it better to seek forgiveness than to ask for permission? Now, there are occasions where I've applied this philosophy. I'm sure a lot of us have applied this philosophy in some way, shape or form over the course of our lives. But that may be applicable in some situations. It's certainly not applicable in all of them. And the other day, someone came along and they took a few things without kind of like properly asking if it was okay to take them. And they kind of left us in a little bit of a lurch as a result. And they just presumed that they could take these things in question. And I wonder if part of that is because they feel they're kind of like above us somehow, and therefore they kind of maybe, with a certain degree of arrogance in their thinking, assumed they could do what they wanted without checking first, and they didn't really think about the consequences of that on us. So, that was, in my view, as I say, quite arrogant, and it remains to be seen what, if any, kind of fallout to this situation or consequences to this situation kind of unfold. But I wasn't particularly impressed or pleased, so we'll have to wait and see as to whether or not anything develops from this. But yeah, it on that particular set of circumstances, they should have asked for permission rather than seek forgiveness. One area where you could say that rule doesn't apply, or does apply, or depending on your perspective. Let's start that a little bit again. So June is Pride Month. Pride Month being, of course, the celebration of all things LGBT. A celebration of those who are, gay, bisexual, transgender, and lesbian, and pansexual, that kind of thing. So it's the month where lots of businesses pay lip service to all of this, as they tend to be kind of behind it to be trendy, as it were. But you also get, in the course of Pride Month, quite a few people who rather vigorously condemn it, of course, and these people are usually hardline religious folk who have long been rather homophobic and transphobic. But all I will say, without going into the politics of it all, is you are fine as you are, and you're beautiful as you are, and happy Pride Month is all I will say to that. June this year, the 6th of June, brought about the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings on the beaches of Normandy. This was a pivotal moment in World War II. It marked the beginning of the opening up of the Western Front on mainland Europe, and it was a huge step towards ending World War II. It involved the landing of hundreds of thousands of brave young men onto the beaches of Normandy in the early hours of the 6th of June. They had got into this in the wake of tremendous planning and preparation, of course, and there were numerous pre-attack strategies used to confuse and weaken the Nazis ahead of the attack, including lots of paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines the night before, and feints and kind of teases elsewhere to draw the Germans off balance. It was a huge undertaking. If it had failed, then it would have been very difficult to muster up the strength to go again, try again. But it proved to be a hugely important success. It marked the beginning of the liberation of France, of course, and the beginning of the end of the Nazi regime. Now, to be fair, I think that the Soviet war machine would have eventually defeated the Nazis anyway, but at a huge cost of lives. And so the success of D-Day helped bring about a much quicker end to the war, and it helped to kind of, in the long run, it saved lives. I genuinely believe it did. And it's something which it can't be forgotten. It absolutely can't be forgotten, what happened, what we were fighting against as an alliance. We were fighting, the forces of fascism, and it saddens me as to how we see elements of fascism creep back into society all this time later. Have we forgotten what happened? The sad thing is, there are far fewer people alive now who remember those events, those terrible years of war, and sooner or later there will be no one left alive who remembers World War II, just as I think we are now sadly at a point where I don't think there's anyone alive from the World War I era. I don't think there's much more time before there'll be no one around who remembers World War II. And with the passing into legend of those generations, it becomes massively important for the rest of us to become the flag bearers and to remember the sacrifices that were made so that we can have the freedoms we enjoy today. People gave their lives so that we could be free, and they didn't do all of that just to witness the return of far-right neo-Nazi thinking 80 years later. So we have to keep their memory alive, and we have to keep doing that year after year, decade after decade, and we have to remember what they were fighting for. And hopefully we can pass on to future generations the importance of those sacrifices. So that's my hope, shall we say, for the future with that. On to slightly happier territory. From that, we have what happened last Thursday. Or rather, what didn't happen last Thursday. So, we had a plan at work to go to a quiz night at a local bar. Now, this place has done quiz nights before, and they've been okay, to be fair. But when we went along last Thursday, did any of us actually bother to check to see if the quiz night was on? No, we didn't. So we got there, all set to answer some questions, and there was no quiz night. It turns out we got our dates wrong. So that was rather hilarious in a sad sort of way. We had a couple of drinks. We figured we might as well whilst we were there. Decent beer in this place, it must be said, albeit it's quite a trendy bar. So the beer was not especially cheap, but I had the money, so why not? And we just, we chatted for a bit. We talked a bit about work. I mean, that's the trouble. When you go out with workmates, you tend to talk shop. It can't be helped. But, hey ho. We had a reasonable night before I headed home. And, it was just a shame we couldn't do a quiz, really. It was also rather weird the other day to have the most unusual nosebleed. I know this is a rapid change of topic now. But the other day I had a bleed from the nose that wasn't actually a nosebleed. And you're probably thinking, what on earth is this daft meerkat on about? Well, I managed to cut the bridge of my nose. I caught myself with a nail and rather cleverly managed to cut myself. This wound, although it was very, very small, it would not stop bleeding. I had to put on 2 plasters in the end because it was threatening to bleed through the first one. It was crazy. I've never managed to do that to my nose at all. I used to get nosebleeds quite a lot as a kid. I'm rather thankful that as an adult it's not so commonplace. But this was the most unusual nosebleed. It wasn't really a nosebleed, was it? It was a bleed from the nose. Very, very unusual. Very, very unusual indeed. So, where do we begin to draw this particular muse to a close? I kind of have to bring up the fact that we're now almost halfway through sort of June, and therefore we are now less than a month away from the general election on the 4th of July. At the moment, Labour have a huge lead, and that's been helped by a couple of things. The Reform Party, led by Nigel Farage, are once again pursuing the bogeyman of immigration, as they always do, and they are splitting the right-wing vote to such an extent that the polls predict that Labour could wind up with a massive majority of, potentially around 125 seats. There is the possibility the Tories will have their worst election return since 1906. Which is, quite the turnaround, really, from their previous majority. Such a huge swing from what it was before. And one of the other things which has hurt the Tories of all this was Rishi Sunak leaving the D-Day ceremony early to come and do an interview, which has struck many as a bit of an own goal, really. since this was an opportunity for him to appear very statesmanlike, and he squandered it somehow. So the Tories have shot themselves in the foot, and the right-wing vote is currently divided enough that it's almost giving Labour a free run at this, which, as someone who despises the Tories, I'm not too upset by this, although I hope that Labour will be, distinguishing themselves more from the Tories in times to come. A lot can change, of course, in an election cycle. There's still quite a long way to go, but I, for one, am not too upset at the possibility of the Tories being absolutely, positively destroyed. Finally, in this long-running ramble of a video, we come to the word that we will soon-ish be getting the start. I think it's actually this weekend. We'll be getting the start of the 2024 European Championships. This is a football tournament which ordinarily takes place every 4 years. The last time around it actually took place in 2021 because of the COVID pandemic. And last time around, Italy were the winners. They beat England on penalties in the final. This time around, the hosts are Germany. And my personal belief is that France will wind up winning it, although Germany as the hosts, despite a couple of dismal World Cups by their standards, will go a lot better than people think. One team that's been named as having the potential to go far is Portugal. Beyond that, I don't really know who the likely candidates are to win it. Some people keep suggesting England, but I cannot take that seriously. Perhaps that's me being far too cynical, but I have had literally decades to witness numerous false dawns and disappointing tournaments from England. So there is absolutely no way I will entertain the idea of England being European champions. It's not going to happen, in my view. If it happens, I will gladly undertake some kind of, hot, spicy, chili challenge and eat that with a slice of humble pie. But in my view, quite simply, England are not going to win it. It doesn't matter what we do, we're not going to win it. It's not in England's destiny to win a major tournament. We had our moment in 1966, and we'll have to make do with that, because it's not happening now. I don't think it's happening within my lifetime. I could live to be 90, and I don't think I will see England win anything at international level. It's just not on the cards for us. So, is that cynical? Perhaps, but that's just my honest, from the heart assessment, having had, as I say, decades to experience what England are like at major tournaments. So, with all of that, I hope you have enjoyed this video and listening to me ramble on for absolutely forever. And maybe the next Muse will feature another video. I don't know at this point. I know that there's a fair few things coming up for me over the next couple of weeks in June. And we'll touch base then. Although, of course, in the meantime, there may be other rambly videos and podcasts and posts and God knows what else, as is the case with this rather scatty meerkat. So until then, I bid you adieu.